Greetings and welcome to the Pransform Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio. This is episode 5 of our second season. For today's episode, we have a really exciting guest, Connor Drake. Connor is a senior coach at Mindmaven, an executive coaching firm that focuses on helping startup and tech leaders free up 10 to 12 hours a week through leverage and delegation, and invest that time into those things that matter most, like taking care of relationships. Connor, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Chris, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for the thanks for the intro. I'm excited to dive in.
Absolutely, you're welcome. The role that you play at Mindmaven, and then we can go into Mindmaven more broadly from there.
Excellent. That sounds good. So as you mentioned, I'm a senior coach at Mindmaven, and what that practically means is I spend a lot of my time working with leaders in the startup ecosystem, VCs, founders, C-suite, and helping them free up large amounts of time, but more importantly, invest that time into relationships. That's the core mission of what we do, and frankly, why I joined the company in the first place.
Okay, awesome. So, Connor, can you kind of stepping back, just kind of tell our audience different elements or aspects of Mindmaven, a little bit about the company background, mission, vision, type of customers, things like that, just so they can get acquainted with what Mindmaven does.
Absolutely. So we've been around, the company itself has been around, probably coming up on a little more than 20 years. I've been with them about 10 years. And most people know us, talk about us, refer us as the time-saving people. Hey, you've got to talk to these guys. They'll give you back a bunch of your time. And that's great. And it's a huge part of what we do. And it's very fun to come in and to give people back these large swaths of time. But as I've hinted at a couple times here, the more important thing is figuring out what you do with that time. There's really no value in freeing up, say, an hour a day from your email if all you do is then dump that hour into managing your calendar. There's no net gain there. We want to get you out of the things that are urgent and make sure that time is being reinvested into those things that are truly important.
Okay. So, Connor, what led you in your professional journey, just, as you progressed, to come to Mindmaven? Like, what led you to join and be attracted to the mission that you just described?
My life in many ways has been a reflection of Mindmaven's mission, this idea that you don't know anyone who's reached the top, who's reached their fullest potential without help from others. And so it was actually, the company was much smaller when I joined it, almost 10 years ago now. It was probably a 3-4 person core team back then. And I came across a job listing on Craigslist back when that was still where jobs were found. I don't even know if that's still a thing. But they were looking for a copywriter. And back then, that was my background. I did a lot of blog writing for startups, for sales companies. And they were looking for their first kind of marketing writer. And I reached out to them because I really resonated with this mission of investing into relationships and taking better care of people. But the moment I read that job description, I remember thinking, yes, I want to write for this company, but I want to be a more active part in delivering that mission. And so I remember interviewing with the founder, Patrick, and I straight up told him back then, hey, I want to join the company, but I want a path to become a coach.
Interesting.
And he was great. He was fantastic. He gave me that path. It took time and effort. It was a couple years with the company before I was in that coaching role. And now, in addition to writing the book that we recently published, most of my time these days is spent with clients.
That's a really awesome story, Connor. I mean, it's probably one of the few, if not the only, I've heard where somebody went into the interview like that and immediately was, kind of looking ahead to where they wanted to go next. And I mean, obviously a great story, success story as far as that goes. I think it also speaks to how attractive the mission not only was to you, but must be to the customers, the clients of Mindmaven. So really appreciate you telling that story. Let's kind of pivot to the concept of radical delegation. You and I had a chance to talk a little bit before our recording today, and this really struck me in terms of some of the points you made about what radical delegation is, what it entails, how it can affect a potential client or customer of Mindmaven. Can you elaborate on some of the key principles? Might talk about what the concept is and what those key principles are.
Absolutely. So Radical Delegation, for those unfamiliar, it's also the title of the book that we just put out. Tiny little plug there. But at its core, Radical Delegation simply means looking at the things that you're doing every day and finding ways to get everything off your plate that does not specifically need to be done by you. So many people, leaders especially, but people in general, spend so much of their time and their energy on tasks that, yes, need to be done, but do not need to be done by them, whether it's managing their own calendar, writing their own emails, trying and failing to follow up on their own commitments or hold other people accountable to their own commitments. These are all things that have to happen, but frankly, you don't need to be the one to do it, and in many cases, you shouldn't be the one to do it because you can't do it at the highest level that maybe someone else more specialized could.
Yeah, you know, it's when you talk about that, Connor, it strikes at home a little bit because for two reasons. Number one, oftentimes being busy can be a substitute for doing the right. You know, when you're not quite sure what the next thing is you're supposed to do, or you don't have full clarity on that, you can fill the time with busyness, and it feels like you've accomplished something. I've fallen into that trap before. I think that also a controlling personality sometimes can't let go of these things and things like, if I'm going to get it done right, I'm going to have to be the one to do it. So can you kind of address those types of things, maybe those 2 points specifically, or those types of things in terms of like what stops people from letting go? What creates that barrier between recognizing the issue exists and then actually letting go and moving into that next phase of actually doing the delegation?
Yeah, you know, that's so common, I think, especially in the leaders that we work with. You know, startups are very often built from a very small core team. Sometimes it's a one-person team that's, you know, then been built up into this 20, 30, 40-person company. But its bones are the founder and a founding team doing everything, wearing a dozen different hats. And so you get used to being the one who does everything, not because it's the best way to do things, but because no one else is going to do it. So there's a couple ways to think about that, but usually it starts with a mindset shift. It has to start with a willingness to let things go. Even if you don't know how you're going to let it go yet, it starts with realizing that every time you say yes to something, you were saying no to 1,000 other things. You know, that email that you need to write. You're saying yes to that because it's only 5 minutes. It's only 5 minutes to write that follow-up email. It's not hard. But the question isn't, is it hard to write an email? The question is, are you the best person to be writing that email? Because that 5 minutes you're investing in this email is 5 minutes you're not spending on something else. And so getting people to really realize that all the little things they're doing add up. If you do, 10 5-minute emails, and most people do a whole lot more than 10, that's an hour of your day. That's an hour of your day that you're then not putting into something more meaningful, something more impactful that drives your business's objectives or your mission in a much more meaningful, strategic way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Yes, it's easy. Yes, it's quick. I mean, you're practically reading out of my mind when you say stuff like that. I've just gone through that kind of process so many times before, and then the next thing you know, you've lost the time and you don't know where it went. So no, I really appreciate you kind of elaborating on that. When we spoke before, when we had sort of our intro call and just getting to know each other a little bit, you had said something at one point that really has stuck with me since then. I mean, nearly the exact quote. When we talked about relationships and how, I guess this is an extension of what we're talking about now in terms of putting the energy where it belongs. We said relationships are often important, but not urgent to, people who end up being, clients of Mindmaven or could be clients of Mindmaven, just people in general. Can you talk about that concept, maybe kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and how Radical Delegation kind of addresses that or helps with that issue?
Oh, I'd love to. So I want to take a step back and revisit something I said at the start of this conversation. I'd said that Mindmaven's core mission was founded on this idea that you don't know anyone who has reached the top without help from others. I've said that line or some variation of that line thousands of times at this point in my career at Mindmaven. I have yet to have anyone disagree with me or push back because I think it's a fundamental truth of being human, that we know relationships are important. We know relationships drive success and happiness and fulfillment, and there's plenty of studies backing that up as well. But even though I can get people to agree to this, that relationships are important, if I then follow up that question with, do you do enough to invest into them? The answer is almost universally no. And it's not a no, like I could do a little bit more. It's no to the point that if I'm honest, I'm neglecting them. I check in with these really important people a couple times a year, maybe if you're really on top of it. And that, I think, is the core problem, because relationships, as you mentioned, they are important. But the things that you need to do to invest into relationships, the delivering of the experiences, they are by their nature very rarely urgent. And we find ourselves living in an increasingly urgency-driven world, right? Where there's so many things demanding our attention, and they seem to be demanding our attention right now. We have to tackle it now, whether it's the inbox or Slack or team member who needs your help or a customer fire that has to be put out. There's all of these urgency-driven things that are, grabbing you by the head and forcing you to look in this direction. So the things like relationships that fall into that important but not urgent camp often tend to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, this is a really powerful thought process for me. When we first talked about it, and it seems like something that really lends itself to that flipping the switch, the mindset, like you talked about before. I think when someone can be led to realize that such is the case that you just laid out, it can totally reprioritize their behavior and their activity. So I see a lot of promise in how that can be so helpful to our audience, others who are in this type of space. So that really left an impression on me. Thank you for kind of going into that some more. Another thing that we had talked about, and I did a little bit of research afterwards from our first discussion on the Grant, and I'm going to say this wrong, the Grant and Gluck study. So forgive me. Before I let you talk about what that is, I must say I was really taken aback by the length of time that study covered, the sort of young age cohorts that went into it and following them through basically into their later years, if I understand correctly. So that was just the characteristic of the study that immediately hit me as, okay, this is pretty powerful, following somebody through their life journey like that. And would love to have you tell the audience what that study was about and what it entailed and those sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating study. And there's some books written on it that if anyone really wants to dig into it, I highly recommend checking them out. But the Grant, and I've always said Gluck, but I also am probably butchering the name. But the Grant and Gluck study that was done by Harvard University, and they tracked something like, I'm going to say about 800 individuals over the course of 75 years. So these were all, I think initially they were Harvard students being tracked over the course of their life. And the core purpose of this study, as maybe surprising as this is, but they set out to find the secret to happiness. What makes some people happy and fulfilled in life versus others? And again, 75 years tracking people with different backgrounds, different cultures, different histories. And by the end of the study, they were able to pretty definitively say that the one thing that the people who reported to be the most happy, the most fulfilled in their life had in common was intentional relationships. And there's a quote from the study that I'm going to try and get right. Let me think here. It was, I think it was as straightforward as good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. And usually when we're talking about that, internally at Mindmaven with our clients, or when we're teaching one of our relationship tactics, what we'll say is at the end of the day, the quality of your life is in many ways a direct correlation of the quality of your relationships. If you want to be happier, healthier, more fulfilled, more successful, then that starts with more intentionally, more strategically, and more authentically investing into the relationships that drive your happiness, success, and fulfillment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Connor. Also, thank you for going easy on me in the pronunciation of the study. I've recently seen, it's kind of interesting, it's just cropped up randomly in between our last call and this recording, but studies talking about happiness in general, that the concept of what makes people happy or not, the loss of community or the strength of community contributing to that. especially as we've gone into a very social media driven world, like very
Yes.
device centric. So we're getting away from real relationships. So the broader sense of like community underpinning happiness or leading and driving happiness, it's so consistent, and it literally just popped in my head as we were dialoguing right now. So consistent with what you described from this study. It seemed to perfectly dovetail to one another.
Hmm.
So yeah, absolutely fascinating. I encourage anybody listening, check that out. At least go to the Wikipedia page, take a look at it. It was really, really interesting when I did that, and thank you for apprising me of that, Connor. If we come back to the radical delegation concept for a second, without giving away the secret sauce or anything like that, are there some specific tools or frameworks, methodologies, if you will, that you would recommend for somebody if they were, let's say, just kind of like starting out before, let's say, engage with Mindmaven, they were trying to test this a little bit? Where might you have them start, or where might be one or two things they could try or think about to move in that general direction?
No, absolutely. And I'm happy to give away the secret sauce. It's a big part of what we do. We give a lot of stuff away freely. It's a mission we believe in. So let's do this. One of the first tactics that we teach in the Radical Delegation book is a concept we call e-drafting. And it's built on this concept, this belief that, well, let me ask you a question. Let's do it this way. Would you agree, Chris, that if you spend, say, 30 to 60 minutes meeting with someone, it would at least deliver a positive experience if they got a meaningful follow-up email from you?
Absolutely.
Good. Most people agree with that. Once or twice I've had someone disagree. But most people agree it at least delivers a good experience.
Yeah.
But most people also admit that they don't do it, or they don't do it consistently or often, or if they do, they're doing it at 11 o'clock at night when all their meetings are done. This is the first time they can sit down and write. And so what we wanted to do was find a way that we can allow people to send those emails because it delivers a positive experience, it invests into the relationship, but doesn't demand so much of their time. The follow-up email, a good follow-up email, is 7, maybe 10 minutes of your time to write something that's not just, hey, great meeting with you, looking forward to talking more soon. But that doesn't add value, that adds noise. But a meaningful follow-up email, 7 to 10 minutes per, you're in 5, 6, 7, 8 meetings a day. That's over an hour just spent writing follow-up emails. Again, not a good use of your time to sit down and write them, but they should happen. And so e-drafting is simply delegating the creation of the experience to someone else. You keep the delivery, but you delegate the creation. So if you were to have, say, an executive assistant, what that looks like is you walk out of a meeting, you want to send a follow-up email. What you're going to do is pull out your phone and send a rough dictation of what you want that email to say to your assistant. Just something like, hey, Chris, it was great meeting with you today. I really enjoyed talking relationships with you and diving into the Grant and Gluck studies. And I'll talk my way through this email. Doesn't have to be perfect, shouldn't be perfect. But my EA will then get that message, be able to take it, write it up in a way where it reads like it's coming from me, and place it in my drafts folder. They are not sending it on my behalf for a dozen different reasons we can talk about. But the core one is this is still my relationship with you, Chris. And the moment that I delegate the delivery of an experience to someone else, it's no longer my relationship and it's no longer authentic. So the creation can be designed by someone else. It's still my thoughts. It's still my words. They're just being written by someone else. And if I've had 6, 7, 8 back-to-back meetings, which is not terribly uncommon, then I get down to my inbox at, say 4, 5 o'clock. And rather than having to write all these emails myself, I have 5, 6, 7, 8 pre-written email drafts all labeled ready. And all I have to do is go in, review it. If it looks good, I click send. I deliver the experience. If it needs work, I can make a couple minor tweaks or hand it back to my EA and say, hey, here's some tweaks I want to make to that email to Chris. Let's use this language instead. They can update it and I can send it out once it's been updated. So that's the core way that can collapse the time, your time that's needed for a follow-up email from 10 minutes down to 1, which is an order of magnitude improvement. But if you don't have an EA, a lot of people who would benefit from this work don't have EAs. Thankfully, AI has gotten to the point where maybe I'm biased. I do not believe AI is a replacement for an EA, not at this point in time. But it makes a lot of the leverage that an EA can offer accessible to those who would not otherwise be able to get it. And that can be as simple as dictating this text into ChatGPT instead and having it write the first draft. You train it on your voice, you send a dictation, it writes it up, you copy and paste it over. It's more manual, but it's still going to reduce your time from 10 minutes down to maybe 5 minutes once you've tweaked the tool in the right way.
So that was an excellent tactical suggestion, Connor. I applaud the pragmatism of it. I think that's something our audience can literally implement as soon as they finish listening to this this recording. So thank you so much for that, and it provided me the perfect segue to where we kind of wanted to wind things down a little bit, where we step back and think about, for someone who is looking to do this, who's trying to delegate better, delegate more, and combining that with where our society and work has gone with AI and the different tools and the assistants and large language models and everything else under the sun that can automate something for us. How do you see the two coming together? Are there areas, you just outlined a great one, where if you didn't have the executive assistant, you could have ChatGPT draft it for you. That would be like a replacement area perhaps for AI. Are there some areas similar to that? And then are there some where you don't see any clear path to AI replacing some of the approach to radical delegation? That it simply isn't going to get to that point or be replaceable that way. So if we could talk a little bit about that. I know AI is almost always on our audience's mind one way or the other. So just wanted to tee that up for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm definitely an AI optimist. I'm a big fan, and a lot of my time these days at Mindmaven is spent exploring AI alternatives to our workflows, to the point now where, for the first time in a long time, I'm working without an assistant, so I can try and replicate a lot of that with AI. And just to reiterate what I've said before, I don't believe it's a replacement, but I do believe it is an augmentation. So maybe here's another way to look at it. I don't believe AI will replace EAs. I do believe EAs who use AI will replace those who do not. I think if anything, AI is going to really augment and make EAs more valuable. Because traditionally there were things that EAs did, like, say, writing that email in that instant example that I gave you. They write that email from your dictation, and usually that starts by transcribing what you said and then turning it into an email draft. Transcribing takes time, and time that, again, isn't the best use of an EA's time if something or someone else can do it. So by having AI take the initial pass at the email, transcribe it, turn it into a first draft, now the EA comes in and tweaks it because they know you on a human level. You've worked together for a while. They know, okay, he wouldn't say it that way. Or, no, even though the calendar's open at that time, I just happen to know that, my executive carves that time out for his family and his kids every night, so I'm not going to offer that time up. So that it frees up the EA's time to do the things that they are best qualified for, the human side of the job. Some of the administrative overhead, yes, AI is going to replace. But I think the human connection element, the experience element that an EA offers, even if it can eventually be replaced, I don't know that I think it should. I envision, maybe it's a little ridiculous, I envision a future where I get an email from you, Chris, and I have this AI-powered inbox. And you're checking in, you're saying, hey, it's been a year since that podcast episode, just wanted to check in, hear what's new in your world. My AI bot gets that email, reads it, looks at my email history, writes an update on my behalf, what's going on in my world over the last year, sends that back to you, your AI-powered inbox, reviews it, replies, and there's this whole conversation where there is no human element. And even though the relationship is technically stronger because we're communicating, we're in interaction more often, you and I aren't any closer, and there's no fulfillment in that.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that you brought that example up, Connor. I think I was recently reading. There's an AI newsletter I get on a daily basis, 5 days a week. Excuse me, and I think it was Perplexity. Although I'm sure there's other tools that do this, but it was talking about how it can research contacts, draft emails to them to do initial engagement and outreach, and send those emails for you. So just as you described, it completely removes the human element from the equation. It's just a machine cranking emails out. Now, eventually, maybe you kind of have an on-ramp to that exchange, and the human can come back into the loop. But you made me think of it when you just described that example, and I totally hear what you're saying about becoming sort of a soulless exercise, if you will. So yeah, exactly, I'm optimistic about AI too. So I think we share that. I think there are aspects of it that seem a little dark in terms of, do humans just completely kind of disengage from each other? And I think obviously as you outlined there, we don't want to see that happen, and that's not going to be a great outcome per se. But the productivity gains, like you described, the EA using the AI is going to beat the EA who doesn't use the AI kind of thing. So really appreciate that, Connor. I think, we can kind of finish up with, this is actually a question, kind of an outgrowth of some of the things you've been talking about to clarify for our audience. When you've discussed the delegation, you've brought the conversation back to an executive assistant. You've mentioned EAs a few times. Is that really from your standpoint, the center of gravity for the radical delegation? Is it really the main vector in the radical delegation? Is it just maybe one element of the radical delegation that we happen to focus on here today? How do you see that role compared to potentially other roles that require delegation or could require delegation?
That's a good question. So our work is very often highly focused on the CEO and what we would call the office of the CEO, getting as much leverage into the office of the CEO as possible. And as a result, a lot of our work tends to be focused on either an executive assistant or a chief of staff. But at the end of the day, the core principles behind delegation and learning to delegate well are really role agnostic. Whether you're an executive delegating to an executive assistant or a team lead delegating to a team member, if you know how to delegate well in a way that sets someone else up for success and gets you the results you want, again, the roles don't matter. It's the core concepts behind what makes delegation work that's important to learn.
Excellent. Yeah, no, appreciate that clarification. It makes perfect sense. Well, I have to say, Connor, we already had a great discussion before we came here, excuse me, and I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think, our audience has things to go off of here to think about in terms of how they do their work and how they're going to get more productive and get more out of their relationships. If there's one thing I would hope they would walk away with word for word, it's the importance of relationships quote that we talked about earlier. And of course, encouraging them to check out Mindmaven and see what you guys do and get more familiar with that. Where can the audience find you specifically, Mindmaven, if they want to kind of dig in a little bit further, follow you guys on social channels? Can you kind of lay that out a little bit for them?
Absolutely. So you can find Mindmaven pretty simply, mindmaven.com. Same with all the social channels, although I'd say we're most active on Twitter, X, whatever language you want to use there. And for me, I don't have a huge social media presence. If you want to ask questions about anything that I talked about here today or get some tool recommendations or whatever, your best bet is just to send me an email. Connor, CONNOR.D@mindmaven.com. Or you can check out my LinkedIn as well. I do my best to stay on top of messages there, and that's just Connor James Drake.
Yeah, no, I got familiar with you a little bit there on LinkedIn. So yeah, definitely encouraging our audience to check out both Mindmaven, check out Connor as well, send him an email. And Connor, I thanked you before we came on. I want to thank you again here on the official recording for doing this, for spending the time with us, for sharing this with our audience. I think anybody who does look into this, who pursues this, there's going to be a benefit there for them. I'm really impressed with what you guys do, and I can't thank you enough for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It was great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Come back soon.
Absolutely.